Hi there, everybody, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you, wherever you are from here in the UK. Once again, thanks for joining us today. Last week, we gave you an update on our product roadmap, the upcoming release of our no-code Verifiable product, and the integration of MasterCard's identity verification service within our mobile SDK and our Connect Me app. Today is going to be much more market sector focused, and it's really good to see a whole bunch of new people who've come on today. So thanks for all those new folks coming in as well. Today we're going to be looking a bit further ahead and plotting out how the world of travel and hospitality will be changed by the advent of verifiable credentials. You're no doubt aware of the IATA Travel Pass program, which is rolling out globally at the moment. But that is just the first toe in the water for verifiable credentials in this sector. So today we'll be exploring what's coming so you can get ready. Joining me today is Jamie Smith, and Jamie leads our program of work with IATA. Jamie, just want to give us a quick intro, please.
Of course, thanks, Andy, and it's great to be here to talk about the exciting opportunities in travel and hospitality. I lead the work at Evernym on kind of verifiable health credentials and our work with IATA and some of our biggest projects around the world.
Thanks, Jamie. Jamie's being a bit modest there. His career has been focused on the impacts of new technology on customers, on end users, and he's worked with some of the biggest brands in the world, helping them to plan their path through the rapidly growing forest or quagmire of digital personal data. So there's nobody better to talk us through the impacts of verifiable credentials and self-sovereign identity on the travel industry. So thanks, Jamie, for coming on today. So here's the agenda. Everything's going to be focused on travel and hospitality related use cases today. We'll kick off with a very quick overview of verifiable credentials for the new members of the audience that have come in. There will be some people who don't know about it. So for those experienced old hands that know all about this stuff, just bear with while we go through that. Then we'll cover the differences between the different approaches to health and vaccine and test credentials that have emerged over the last few months, and why digital wallets represent a significant and major leap forward. For travel companies, this is all about user experience, and there's a huge opportunity to transform the way you deal with and interact with your customers and users. And Jamie's going to talk through that to give you an idea of what's coming down the line. And we'll let you know also, obviously, how you can get started and get ready for the changes that are coming. As usual, please note the webinar has been recorded. We'll send out the recording afterwards. In fact, we post them all on evernym.com/webinars. And we got a whole host of really informative content there for you if you want to look back at some of the previous ones. If you've got any questions, can you put them into the Zoom Q&A? We tend not to use the chat. The Q&A is a bit easier for us to keep track of. So put them in the Zoom Q&A, please. And Alex in the background gathers all of these together, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end as per usual. We often get loads of questions. There's no such thing as a bad question. This is a very new world of verifiable credentials. So if you've got any questions you want to ask, just drop them in the Q&A and we'll cover as many of them as we can. So that's the intro done. Let's kick off. Jamie, over to you.
Thanks so much, Andy. So let's dive into what are verifiable credentials and digital wallets, and why do they matter really for hospitality and travel? So put at its most simplest, digital credentials are the same as bits of paper that we use every day. We're given them by organizations, but they're digital versions. And that means that they can be portable. That means I have them on my device, physically on my mobile phone, and I can share them with whom I want. When they're shared, they become immediately verifiable. That's the challenge with bits of paper and plastic. We've usually got to call someone or do some lookup or something. With verifiable credentials, we can instantly check who issued them and where they've come from. We can check their tamper-proof, which means that we know the individual or the traveler hasn't played around with them or changed their date of birth or something. We know they're secure because they're on the device. They're not, lingering in a centralized database somewhere. They're private, and the individual can control what they receive and what they share. And we know they're trusted because we can build ecosystems of who are the approved issuers? Who do I want to trust? Where are they coming from? So it's this really powerful breakthrough of not only digitizing and making digital the paper we already have, but then putting them in a digital wallet that I control as the traveler. And that means, well, now we can share any data anywhere. So let's pick out some examples. I could create a digital city pass wallet. And that means I could prove that I'm in town for a short amount of time, or that I'm a customer of a specific company, and I could get immediate discounts on local tourist attractions. And the great thing is I could actually not just share them digitally, but I can also share them perhaps when I'm on the phone. Next up, I could think about having a digital boarding pass or an airline lounge card. And that means I get privileged access. I could have member only access to a part of the lounge or a part of the airport or part of the traveler experience. I could even have a car rental agreement as a credential. And that means I could have express check-in when I'm collecting my car. I could register much more easily and quickly. And then as the travel document, I could have a visa, for example, as a credential. And I can prove my entry requirements at a border, for example. Why is the digital wallet really powerful? Well, it means that I can start to digitize the credentials that I've got, but I'm in control of them. And let's take a very, very real example. So, we can talk abstractly about digitizing things and have done for many years, but COVID health data has been, there's no more powerful and immediate example of where it's creating friction for customer experiences, for organizations that need to see health data, certainly in travel and hospitality. And right now we've got a couple of options. And so, well, paper is the easiest and most obvious, but it creates queues. Maybe if I've got this, if I digitize it, it's clumsy upload experience. Maybe I have to kind of take a photo of it or something. I don't know where it's come from necessarily if it's on paper, and I can only share the data that's in that bit of paper. If we try and digitize them, that's the next thing that people have been trying to do. So then we take all the data in the bit of paper and we put them on our mobile device and we say, fantastic. But actually what's happening is the data's inside a QR code. So that's our personal data now kind of encoded in a QR format. And that's helpful because I can now digitize it. But that's not the end of the story. If you dig a little bit deeper, let's think about what that means when the data's inside the QR code. Well, now I can only share the specific and fixed data that I had in the QR code. When someone scans it, I've got to share all the data. Now think about that for a second. Probably I've got my health information, but also my first name, last name, and date of birth. How many instances do I need to share? Perhaps I'm vaccinated, but you don't need to know my date of birth. I've also got to carry around my paper ID to say, well, this digital cool QR code also belongs to me. Here's my paper.
There was actually a thing, wasn't there, Jamie? Somebody in the airline industry reported in that a flight had arrived and everyone had paper vaccine certificates or test certificates, and it turned out they were all a photocopy of the same thing.
Yeah.
And there was nothing within the certificate to bind it to the actual person. All the paper had been photocopied, and with these, I guess you could screenshot them as well, could you?
Well, that's the point. I can with this QR code, I've got to carry around some other proof of it, and exactly, I could copy it very, very easily. Quite right. So, if we look at vaccination certificates specifically, and we're going to get onto why this is relevant for travel in a minute, but if you think about vaccination certificates, inside them there are unique serial numbers, and I'm going to be sharing them every time I present this QR code. So that's like leaving behind your phone number everywhere you present this. It's like a unique identifier. I've mentioned before this kind of experience where I've got to hold up the phone and there's something else, and even if I scan it, I've got to take a photo of it. It gets a bit clumsy. If we think about when we use these, QR codes are going to be scanned by someone, and that means I've got to be face to face. And if not, there's going to be some kind of heavy integration that means this particular app can scan this particular QR code, and it gets a bit more complicated. So largely they're good for face to face, and that means queuing. So we're still not away from this paper, the challenges with paper. And here's my favorite one. How do I know who's asking? What's to stop me putting on a yellow high-vis jacket, in the car park and scanning everyone that comes through, and suddenly I've got their COVID data, but I've also got their first name, last name, and passport. How do I know?
Yeah, date of birth as well, and maybe
Exactly.
some other ID information.
Precisely. So we need to ask questions about, is it safe?
Jamie, just I think for this one, maybe we do some of the questions as they come in.
Sure.
We've actually had one from Bill Carroll already. How do we get the consumer or traveller to use, control, and update the wallet? What types of companies are likely to lead the effort? So we're kind of jumping ahead to, I think Bill knows what the wallet might look like. But how would they get started? What's IATA, but they've got plans as well, and other airlines have got plans and so on. How do you see that working? Where do these wallets come from, and how do they work?
Really good question, and I do think we can touch on some of it later when we get into how do you create a wallet and who might offer them. But I think, simply put, it's going to be from brands that individuals already trust. And I think it's individuals who already have an app from an airline or from their employer, or maybe a retailer or a bank or someone. And we're going to see digital wallets as part of the app that's already out there. And so the app will be updated. And so the many millions of people who already have an app will say, oh, the new version has a digital wallet in it. Oh, and by the way, we've already issued some of the data we know about you into that wallet, and the individual will be able to accept it or not. So I think there's going to be a mixed ecosystem. There'll also be some new wallet brands out there, I think. This is going to be a new category of service, a bit like browsers were a new category. But it's going to be mixed. But largely, to answer the question, I think brands that individuals already trust and that they already have a customer experience with.
So in the travel world, then maybe it's not even called a digital, it's just in your British Airways app or your Air France app, or
exactly.
So it's just in there, because you can put things in there at the moment, but they're kind of fixed formats, aren't they?
Exactly.
So maybe it's just built in and it just happens, and nobody needs to understand the term digital wallet from a consumer perspective, maybe.
Well, that takes us perfectly to the next slide, which says, we've just described the drawbacks of, putting data in the QR code. Well, let's look at what that world looks like if I've got a digital wallet. Well, number one, I get the ability to selectively share, because the data is now digital. I can share bits of it. So imagine I've got my passport. I can just share my date of birth, or I could just share my passport number. Or if I've got my hotel.
With the passes that are all embedded, the data's in the QR code, you can't do that, right?
Exactly, that's the point. That if I'm scanning a QR code where the data's in it, I've got to share everything.
Yeah, you're sharing a whole lot
data's in a digital wallet, I can selectively share bits of it. And actually, if you go further, I could give you a yes or no about the data. So I could say, are you vaccinated? Yes or no. Are you over 21? Yes or no. Do you have a boarding pass for a flight that's happening today? I don't need to know which one, but to get into this part of the airport or this part of the hotel, yes or no. And that means
you could go to the extreme, couldn't you? And you could say, are you allowed into the US? Yes or no.
Yeah, well, exactly.
You could actually do that.
The value there is that organizations are going to have these lovely big databases of yeses and nos. And that's really reducing the liability. That becomes significantly less of an attractive target to hack if I've got a big database of yeses and nos, not the root data.
Yeah.
This next one is also really fantastic. I can start to put different data sets together and combine them and then share them in one transaction. So a hotel could say, please share your perhaps COVID status, my passport number, my booking reference information, and my loyalty, just the loyalty number in one go. So please share all of that with us. My phone wakes up and says, do you want to share it? I say, yes.
Yeah.
And it's
so previously you'd have a mix of bits of paper and cards and something on your phone and so on.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's going to be the first sort of big step forward in user experience then, isn't it? That convenience of, I just want to check in, here's what you need to check me in, and I can see what I'm sharing, and it's all done in one go.
Correct. Because the data on my wallet is now bound to other identity documents, I get really, really strong copy and cloning protection, which is going to be really valuable from a data protection perspective and also privacy. Back to this point about not only the attributes are you sharing, but what other kind of unique bits of metadata or correlating other bits of information do you share? And with a digital wallet, if designed in the right way, we can make sure we're sharing the data that's only relevant for what they need and not any other, let's say, digital breadcrumbs that can be tracked from place to place.
Yeah. So with that then, if you, just to expand on that a bit, when you share something with a hotel and then you share something else with, I don't know, a retailer for you go shopping, right? You're not sharing the same identifier with both of them, so they can get together behind the scenes and correlate that, oh, Andy's checked into the Premier Inn and he's gone to Wetherspoons for some beers. They can't correlate that because they're separate identifiers, right? That's what you mean by the tracking across context.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So Evernym did a project a couple of years ago where we created a seamless experience for an online travel agent, where you get that form where you pick your flight, you pick your car rental, you then get a payment information, you get the really long form, and then you get to the end, and then something read, oh, you missed a bit, no, it's the wrong format. All of that's gone. Check out with your digital wallet. I say yes. The request comes up saying you need to share this information, or actually some attributes from those credentials, and it's kind of one-click checkout. It's like Amazon one-click checkout, but for everything everywhere. So I get these fantastic seamless customer experiences.
Yeah, I think that identity enriched payment stuff is going to be huge, isn't it? All right, a couple more of these, and then we've got a few more questions that we'll just cover as well once we get to the end of this list.
So, I love that this layers and layers, these features and benefits keep growing, but let's just think about that for a second. I can now share the data remotely. So rather than having to queue and have something scanned, although that is possible, let's say I'm flying London to Singapore, or maybe, and then when I land, I'm staying at the Marriott. When I do that, the Marriott can say, hey, could you share your information ahead of time? And I get the notification in my wallet. I say yes. I can say no, by the way. I can say yes, and the data goes ahead of time. So I can share my COVID status with the immigration authority before I leave my house. And that means when I land, I go into that queue, not that queue, and it goes much faster. We've already seen lots of stuff in the news already about how immigration queues are getting really challenging. And not only that, creating opportunities for transmission of this horrible virus. So sharing the data remotely becomes a real value add from a digital wallet perspective.
Yeah, and that's advanced passenger information is an obvious one there, isn't it? One global airline told us 50% of the advanced passenger information they get is wrong. That's why they have to check again when you get to the airport. So here you can provide verifiable data without having to fill any forms in and do it ahead of time. So it could be, it could even be on arrival, visa, passport information, you share your passport photo amongst other attributes as well. So that gets really powerful, doesn't it? That ability to share ahead of time.
And the last one I think is really, really important from a trust and a governance perspective. Not only is the data on device, which means it's not, it's not in a database somewhere and I'm pulling it through. It's physically on my phone. But I can now audit requests, and think about that for a second. I can now track who's asked me for what, and what have I shared with whom. And so there is, I think, a legitimate concern about a kind of papers, please, a moment where people start saying, well, if it's in a digital wallet, then anyone can ask for anything. Well, just think about how the motivation changes when I can prove who's asked me for what, and say these organizations have just asked me for this set of data, and very quickly that becomes a motivating factor to make sure you're only collecting what you absolutely need. And
yeah, so and that's there's a question just come in actually from Andre Walter. Hi, Andre. Who in the chain of transactions here will take responsibility to do data minimization to only share the necessary PII? And you've just described a really important motivator, which is I've got a record of what you asked me, and if I don't like it, I can go and complain to somebody, say, well, look, XYZ company, Jamie Airlines, is asking for what I think is much too much data. Here's what they've asked for. So that's a motivator. But maybe just talk about the governance framework, the trust framework stuff, Jamie, as well, and how that works. Maybe for setting out what the principles should be. And I guess IATA is a good example of that.
Yeah, so in any ecosystem, I'm going to use some buzzwords, we need to know who can we rely on? Who are the approved issuers? We also need to think about who are the approved wallets. So are we going to trust every wallet or just some of them? But then on the relying party side, the verifiers, we call them, those asking for the data, a governance framework or some policies can set out, well, who's allowed to ask for what? And therefore, who's overreaching? Here's what's required to open a bank account. Here's what's required to book a plane. Here's what's required to get into the hotel. And actually, we can start to see a lot of transparency about who's asking for what. And I think the citizen rights groups, the consumer watchdogs, and ultimately regulators will start to get a really good visibility about how data is being shared and being retained unnecessarily. Yeah,
it's raising it out of the kind of murky world, isn't it, into a very transparent world where you can see and audit and check what's happening. And actually, that you mentioned something about different wallets and things. There's a couple of questions here. So T. Navine Chawra, hi to you, says, does this mean there'll be a universal wallet to be used by all users and all credential issuers? It's the wallet wars question again, Jamie.
I feel quite strongly about this one. I think it's going to be different apps and wallets for different things, a bit like your physical world. When I go traveling, I've got my wallet with my travel things in it, and when I maybe go into town or clubbing or something, I maybe take out a bunch of the really precious documents and I have only what I need in it. And so it's going to matter by context. But here's the other thing. If I can have my proof of salary, that might fit well in a banking context or banking app. I probably don't want that in my flight app, but maybe I don't want my boarding pass in my banking app. So there are going to be apps that are going to be dependent on context. And I do think there's going to be a brand trust, brand reach, and legitimacy question, and a capability question. Who's got a really strong app experience and wants to create great new revenue streams and great new customer experiences for their customers with partners.
Perfect on that. I think the whole wallet, who are the suppliers going to be? It's a bit like the browser wars, isn't it? And you might have like one browser you use for work, and you might have another browser you use for other things, for example. Maybe same thing for wallets.
I do think there might well be general purpose wallets. Just like the wallet you carry around every day probably has your driving license and a couple of loyalty cards and a bank card. I think those will exist, and I do think Apple and Google and those folks will probably step into those general purpose, everyday wallet markets.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of questions from James here as well. Hi, James. Users likely to have multiple wallets installed on their devices. Well, as we said earlier, they may not know they've got a wallet, right? They've just got an app. It might be an airline app or a hotel loyalty app that just does things magically. So that's, I think it remains to be seen, doesn't it, Jamie, how that's going to evolve. But also goes on to say, in fact, James has bunged in 4, 5. What does it mean for holders in terms of recall and recognition, as well as efficiency as part of their experience interacting with companies? I think, there's that term in the financial world, isn't there, Jamie, with which card is top of wallet, which bank card is top of wallet. You might get that with credentials as well, or which wallet do you open first? And we're seeing some interesting progress with operating system layer wallets, iOS and Android wallets. They're still pretty basic in terms of some of the things that are on the screen, like selective sharing and the anti-surveillance stuff. They're still pretty basic from that perspective, but that could be an interesting route things go as well. And there's another really good question here from, I'm going to get into trouble here, Prismek Prajolek. I hope that's roughly good enough. Thanks for putting that question in. We'd love to hear more about differentiation, about the different ePass implementations versus ones that are more directly linked to verifiable credentials, which is handy actually that you've asked that, because you're just about to come onto that, aren't you, Jamie?
I am, exactly. So let's go back to this distinction. We've talked about credentials, that's all well and good, but it's where you put them. And credentials is really a way of encoding the data. So either you encode it in a QR code or you put them in a digital wallet. And there's been just fantastic progress over the last 9-12 months on how to create data, a verifiable data, specifically health data. But we're putting the data into a QR code. And so I've listed there some of the drawbacks. It's not to say that they're not great. They are helping restart global travel, and they are helping get rid of some of the issues around fake, let's say, COVID tests. But there are drawbacks. And so I kind of think of it as the tactical versus the strategic response. This is a great tactical response. It gets us, out of the initial COVID recovery, but they are putting the data into a QR code and they have some drawbacks. And so the flip side, Andy, is the next picture, which says, well, what if we have a digital wallet approach? And we've been working with IATA, which you mentioned before, and there's the Good Health Pass initiative, which we co-founded, end of last year, with the likes of MasterCard and Accenture and IBM and ID 2020. And the logic is, well, let's not just have a tactical answer, let's have a strategic one. And let's not just have credentials, but passes, things that allow us to do things, not just use the raw data. And it's this conversion between saying, I know your date of birth. That doesn't mean I can do something. It might be the yes or no that allows me to say, yes, you can come in. Or I've got my COVID certificate. What does the pass allow me to do? And with a wallet approach, I can add identity. I can add boarding passes, hotel bookings, car rental agreements, it goes on and on. And so I use
a distinction with the ones on the left and the ones on the right. So the ones where all the data is in the QR code, I was using the term dumb credentials, which I don't think is right. they're basic credentials, right? Versus they're basic, they're simple, they do a single function and they can't do anything else. You can't separate the data out, you can't pull attributes out, etc. So let's call them simple credentials. And then on the right-hand side, verifiable credentials, they're kind of smart, right? Because you can manipulate them and do things with them in different ways and combine them together and share bits of them, and they have privacy characteristics. So maybe we think of them in terms of simple credentials and smart credentials, and maybe somebody on the chat can come up with a better term for those two as well. So chuck them in here, maybe we'll do a vote at the end.
Exactly. So we should get into what the customer experience benefits might be and where this really starts to impact travel and hospitality. But the framing up to this point is credentials are important, but it's where you put them. And is this a tactical solution, which allows us to get something done to a kind of initial response, which frankly is good enough for lots of use cases. But the strategic one allows you to expand into many more capabilities, like sharing the data remotely, being able to share only bits of the data, but also open up a whole ton of new use cases, which is what this next section is about.
This is where it gets really good, isn't it? So
I hope so. So let's describe a bit about what the data flows are going to look like. So this is a bit of a busy picture, but if we just talk left to right, so we talk about issuers. So they're the people who give you bits of paper today, and we're going to digitize them into verifiable credentials. And so in this case, it's my COVID test lab. I get my COVID test result. That's great. I can go to the sports match. I can fly into the country or whatever. They then issue them to my digital wallet. I hold them on my device. And then as a result, I can then share them over and over again. It's kind of create once, use many times. I can share them with my airline, with my hotel, with the retailer, with the loyalty company, whoever it might be. And there's some specific characteristics of this ecosystem. We call it, issuers, holders in the middle, and then verifiers. But there's some specific kind of features that create incredible value for these ecosystems that start to emerge. So if we run through the next couple of slides, firstly, okay, well, the QR code thing, they could give me my data and I can share it many times. But you can't do this. I can't have my test result and my driving license and the car rental agreement and my reservation for a hotel or whatever in my wallet. They can't, that suddenly becomes multiple QR codes, which doesn't work. So not only can I issue them from multiple places, but I can now share them in combination across travel and hospitality. So the airline might need my government ID and my COVID test. The bar might want my proof of age and a reservation. And the car rental company says, well, can you give me your rental agreement and your driving license? And I can do all of those things with one tap. So I've got this kind of melting pot of credentials on my device, and people can come and ask me for bits of them or combinations of them to fill any kind of number of different use cases. And this is where it becomes really, really powerful. So combining different attributes from different places with one tap.
Yeah, I think this is a really good diagram to just explain that. You're going from a single point use case of a simple credential, if we call it that, to smart credentials that can be for any purpose. And this, if you've got a verified passport credential, that's going to be used in a lot more places than just travel and hospitality, right? For all sorts of purposes. Yeah. So this is a really great example of the flexibility and openness you suddenly get when you're using verifiable credentials.
Exactly. So then think about the fact that we've now got credentials being shared in a digital wallet that can be instantly verified, meaning when the airline receives a credential, they can check where it came from, who issued it, who it was given to. Was it given to Jamie and only Jamie? Has it been tampered with? And potentially even has it been revoked? And they can do that instantly without having to do some kind of API call back to the database. At the moment we're seeing partnerships grow up between, hotel groups and all the testing companies, or airline groups and testing companies. Actually, we can break that. We don't have to integrate these organizations. We can say anyone wants to rely on the data can instantly check where it came from. And we can have governance frameworks to say, well, who are the approved issuers, which gets into a policy, not a technical conversation. But it means there's no intermediaries. There's no third parties brokering the data. There's no database in the middle that I look up and could potentially go offline. What if the issuer is temporarily offline? Can we, does that mean I can't verify my data? In this model, it's instantly verifiable by the relying parties, which is really powerful.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Jamie. This is one of the reasons why IATA are using this approach. It's a scale question and a always on question, isn't it? So we spend a lot of our time, Jamie and I, talking to COVID test labs all around the world who want to integrate with IATA Travel Pass. And when they learn that there's a single integration with 3 transactions down an API, they don't have to talk to every airline, they don't have to talk to every airport, etc. There's a single integration, and the data goes direct to the end user, to the passenger, not into some big database. They kind of breathe a sigh of relief, don't they? And so that gives you the scale. You don't have to have this massive inter-networking of all the participants together, which never scales. Therefore, the solution to that often is put a big database in there, then someone's got to run it and have all the liability associated with it if it gets hacked, etc. This does away with all that, and the verifiers can check instantly if the credential's authentic or not.
Let me say one more thing before we move on, and we've got so many more things I want to get into, but
there's so many more questions coming in as well.
Exactly. There's a really important point. Think about paper. You're given your driving license by the government, maybe from the DMV in the US or the driving license authority. It would be really weird if every time I presented it, they knew about it. Every time I presented to get into a bar or hire a car or whatever, in the paper world, it doesn't happen. And so when we move to digital, I don't know why we should accept that the same thing should be true, that whenever I present it, someone does this phoning home to check it's a good one. Yeah. And what we want is to break the bind, so we get not only privacy, which is a really important fundamental part of our digital ecosystems, but we get scalability. This whole thing's decentralized, meaning that we're not relying on someone standing up a service 24/7 to say, yes, this is a good one, this is a good one, this is a good one. So with that said, let's push through the next section, and then we can go back to some.
Yeah, there's about roughly 1 million questions, Jamie, as well.
Okay, good.
And we are going to get, I know you've got quite a few more slides. We've got to fit this in somehow. Let's just move on quickly with the slides because I just need to pass some of the questions as we're going through. But
Yeah,
let's
exactly.
cover this section here, and then let's come back to some of the questions come in.
So we're kind of layering the value. We've talked about the value of credentials and splitting them up. We've talked about the value of wallets. Well, now if we design the ecosystems properly, based on open standards, then we get this other new incredible capability or feature, which is anyone can participate. So if I send an email from Gmail and I send it to Andy's using Outlook, it'll just work because we agreed the handshake of what the email protocol is. Well, the same thing's true here. I can have an issuer using vendor A, and I can have an app provider using vendor B, and it'll just work. The credential will arrive and I can cryptographically sign it and do all those things. But then when the airline wants to receive it, they could use digital platform C and they could request the data from me. And again, it'll just work. The hotel can use another vendor, and actually a restaurant or another hospitality organization could build their own solution from the open source. And again, it'll just work. Just like if I wanted to, I could build an email client using open source software. Would I do that? Probably not, but I could. The point is anyone can participate. And that's what you get, these lovely open ecosystem effects. And that's the real value of doing it in an open way.
Yeah, perfect. And it's a bit like browsers, isn't it? You can get a browser from anywhere as long as it supports HTML and CSS and those other open standards, it'll work. So think of it like that. Let's just do another couple of questions here. There's a really good one. Ralph Lippold. Hi, Ralph. Currently, the verification is bound to an online connection, often using blockchain and other technologies. How will the verification happen in an offline state and instantly, as is often the case in travel situations, especially outside well-covered city regions? So really, really good question. Maybe I'll just cover this quickly, Jamie, on offline use. So offline use comes up quite a lot. We've actually already been working and shown how you can prepare a proof in advance, and you with your wallet can show a QR code, and that directs the verifier to a place where they can go and retrieve your proof that you prepared in advance. So you don't need to be online with a data connection. So that's a really interesting approach. And regarding the verifiers being bound to a ledger, well, remember under the skin here, there's a decentralized repository of issuer keys. Okay. There's no PII on the ledger or anything like that, as I think I mentioned that on every webinar. But there are issuers' public keys for verifying these credentials, and that's what you need to get to. And it's perfectly feasible, if you want to pull those in the morning from the ledger and cache them and then verify against them. You'll have a window where they might change in that window. It's unlikely, but they might, and you can decide whether to accept that risk and work offline as well. So quite a few interesting offline use cases around things like refugee processing in deserts and that kind of thing. So lots of work happening on that, Ralph, at the moment. So let's press on here, Jamie.
Okay, there's one more slide about features, and then I want to talk about some use cases for travel and hospitality, and then maybe we can wrap up and do those final questions. So let's just step back from verifiable credentials for a second. I've got a digital wallet and I'm connecting with and creating a private communication channel with, let's say, the hotel. And I might use that to share credentials like we talked about. But actually, I don't have to. I could use that to log in. I could use that to authenticate myself. So when I go to the hotel website, it says, log in with your username and password, or there's a button that says, log in with your digital wallet. And I click that, my phone wakes up, the wallet wakes up and says, are you trying to log in? I go, yes. And that's it, I'm in. So we just got rid of usernames and passwords. But also I could use that channel for other things, for messaging. So that same hotel or whoever it might be could message me and say, hey, your room's available. Do you want to accept it now? Here's your room key as a credential. Or would you like an upgrade today? Yes.
I'll definitely take that one.
Yeah, exactly. So we've now got this very powerful wallet way of thinking about interacting with organizations. So we're going to move on to the use cases, but just, we've now got credentials that become really powerful. We've got a digital wallet that becomes really powerful, and that allows us to create a whole, families of use cases for the traveler, where the data is verifiable, it's trusted, it's scalable, it's secure, and I think really becomes the next generation of how travelers and customers are going to interact with organizations.
Yeah, this what's on the screen now is really, it's like a hidden benefit, isn't it, Jamie? It's, people think just it's all about credentials, but underpinning this is a protocol that lets you, for free, you get it with it. You're able to do multi-factor, usernameless and passwordless authentication, and that's just pretty epic on its own. And the direct peer-to-peer messaging. You don't need WhatsApp because you've got a direct connection with the hotel, with the airline.
Exactly so. All right, let's push to the next section and then come back to questions. So I'm going to spend 5 minutes talking you through, what a common travel experience could look like, bringing together each of these features and capabilities that we just talked about. So first of all, I'm going to go to a travel website, and I'm going to book a flight. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to log in. Well, now, because I'm a returning customer, I might go to my favorite airline or travel agent, and I tap on the login with your wallet. In this case, sign in with ConnectMe. So we just got rid of usernames and passwords. I pick my flight. Maybe I pick car rental and a hotel. And again, I click on the button that says check out with your wallet. So I can now share all my identity information, my loyalty data. Another hidden benefit, I can put my payment information in there. I can put that long card number, the expiry date, all that stuff, all just gone. So now I've got checkout with one tap on what can be quite a clumsy experience. And so many travel organizations are optimizing the form to fit on a phone, when actually I don't need the form. So all that money being spent on optimizing the mobile experience can really be completely revolutionized. And I think we're going to move to a real strategic shift to how CRM works, online booking and so on works with these wallets. So then it's now a couple of days before I fly. The airline says, well, we need your COVID test. Well, guess what? I get a notification saying, please share your COVID test and passport details. I say yes, one tap, and it goes ahead. I can do that from my home before I've left the airport, no more queuing. So same thing, I'm flying from Heathrow to Singapore. The Singapore government can ask me that before I've left my house. So when I arrive, I go into the I've shared it before queue, and that speeds up. We get these fantastic kind of seamless check-in experiences. If I can do that for hotel, for airlines, well, I can do that for my car rental and the hotel. Same thing. Please share your details in advance, and I get this one tap kind of express check-in.
This gets particularly good when there's you've got a verified ID document like a passport with a photo that Jamie comes and Jamie's face matches who they're expecting that's called Jamie that they verified. So through you go.
So now I've traveled, I've arrived, I'm on my plane, but have I got a connecting flight and the flight gets delayed? So I can now be notified in real time to my wallet. They don't send me an SMS that might get lost or an email to a junk folder. I get a message to my wallet that says, hey, the flight's delayed. We would like to host you in our lounge and give you a free drink. Would you like to accept a credential? I say, yes. And then the credential arrives that gives me access to the lounge just for maybe that 3-hour window and maybe a drink voucher. And if you think about it from an enterprise perspective, the customer services representatives could create that workflow on the go. They could say, I want to message this message to these wallets, and when they accept, send this credential that covers these things. And they could create that, in 5 minutes. And then the CRM system, the kind of backend integration means you can layer on top these credential workflows that become really powerful.
And being a secure message, it's not a phishing message because it's come from the airline. Right?
Exactly, where it's come from. So I've now arrived, I'm traveling. I might receive another secure message that could be an offer, a guided tour from the hotel. So I can say, would you like to accept the guided tour tomorrow? Yes. Instant checkout. And I receive the booking credential. And that means the next day I'm not fishing out bits of paper. Can I print this thing that says my name? Actually, I've just got a credential request and I can share that with the guide the next morning. So we get these new seamless joined up experiences that are digital first, mobile first, that really transform, I think, the way we interact with customers and travelers.
And I think there's going to be a new language, isn't there, Jamie? We talk, because we're kind of in the industry here, we're talking about receiving a credential and proving something. I think there's going to be a new language that emerges that describes these transactions in a much more user-friendly way than our sort of pseudo technical way. So that's going to be really interesting to see how that evolves as well.
So finally, I've now got my car rental agreement as a credential. And as I mentioned a couple of years ago, we did a project with this use case, and we worked with the organizations involved. And I could then have my car rental agreement. I could go straight to the car, unlock the car using NFC, and they can challenge me for my credential. You know, it should only open for the person with this credential at this time. And I don't need the specific car rental app. I can now have my traveler app. And I can be challenged for the credential, and then I can, you know, no more waiting in lines after with the long queues after a long flight. So you get the sense now that this all becomes really exciting. But guess what? Isn't this just futuristic? You know, we've been telling this customer-centric, traveler-centric story for ages. You could have written these slides 20 years ago. Well, the next slide says no. It's actually been built. It's in the App Store, and for those who've been following Evernym's progress with IATA, will know the travel pass is live. It is a digital wallet. It looks like a travel app, but in it is your passport as a credential, which means I can share bits of it. I can share just my passport number. In it will be your vaccination certificate as a credential, and I can share yes or no against it. It's already been trialed by 75 airlines on more than 150 routes. We've got over 1,000 labs participating globally, and it's just the start. You know, we're going to be adding more and more features. IATA have a really grand vision for this. You know, this was never about COVID data and health data. It was about seamless travel. It was about getting from the curb to the plane without touching anything. So I can add boarding pass. I'll be adding passenger locator forms and so on. So look, let's maybe talk a bit about how this all becomes possible.
Before you do, Jamie, there's a bit that first bullet point. Can you just spend a minute just on that?
A good point. So I've talked about different sources of data. Well, there are, I'm going to call them issuers around the world who are already creating verifiable credentials or structured data of healthcare. So the travel pass will be able to ingest them and put it in the wallet, like with all my other stuff. And so the EU Green Pass, the EU DCC, the digital COVID credential, can be ingested, and they say, well, I've already got my passport. Let's check the first name matches the data that's in the EU Green Pass. If it does, yeah, we'll have that as a verifiable credential. And now I can do all the stuff that I can't do with a QR code. I can say yes and no. Do you have the credential? Yes and no. Do I want to share just one bit of data against it? And, you know, the NHS England, the Qatari, the Singapore COVID credentials, the certificate, health certificates are already in there as well. So vaccines are.
It's really significant, this, because it's turning the simple credentials into smart credentials, which is it's a huge leap forward, because the travel pass has got a verified passport credential in it, and it can then do the binding of that verified passport credential with a vaccine credential, which has your first name, last name, date of birth, and can match the two together. And then it becomes smart. And I think, and it retains all of the verification capabilities that the QR code has, plus more as well. So I think that's why I wanted to just expand on that a little bit more.
No, good point.
More questions are coming in, but let's crack on.
Yeah, exactly. And just a time check. A quick time check. You know, we always get so many questions, and we've decided to pepper them through the presentation today. And it sounds like we could probably go 10 or 15 minutes long. Would that work for you, Andy?
Yeah, I think we won't make people suffer too much. I think we'll do 10 minutes, Jamie, and go from there.
Grand. Okay, so how does this become possible? How do you make this a reality? Because again, it's all just theory so far. Well, IATA's launched because they've got the capabilities we've been building for 5 years now. So at the heart of the travel pass, in the middle, they've built an app, and inside it is the digital wallet. And we have a mobile SDK that allows you to do that. So we can put that mobile SDK inside a hotel app or a car rental app or a bank app or any others. We've got a Verity platform that allows any organization to issue any credential. So IATA are using it to verify, to issue passports. Test results will come from the labs. And again, airlines and airports will be using it to receive the data from the digital wallet. So we've got a suite of products that allows organizations to really get started, to issue anything they want, to receive anything they want, and for the individual to have a wallet that will just work. And of course, if you just want to interact with the travel pass, you can do that. You could stand up your own capability as a hotel to start receiving COVID data or passport information from the travel pass. So it becomes a really flexible set of tools.
Yeah, I think we did a webinar last week on Verifiable and other product stuff. So rather than swamping everyone with lots of salesy stuff, go look at that or look at evernym.com to find out much more about it. I think maybe we'll just do this one, Jamie, then hit the Q&A, should we?
I think so. There's probably one more slide which I'd like to show up, but this isn't just travel. I suppose you're in good company. You know, the UK NHS is looking to create, again, a multi-vendor ecosystem where they give their employees a digital staff passport, and lots of them, you know, over 1 million. Organization called Bonify in the US have launched Member Pass for the credit unions, and Lumedic in the US has also created a patient-centric health records using the same digital wallet. And you can see there are a really fantastic array of organizations, we're working with to bring credentials and wallets to life. Yeah. The slide I wanted to bring up was a couple more ahead. So not this one, the next one, which says, sorry, the one before, that says, yeah, well, if you wanted to get started, we've got a white label digital wallet, so you don't even need to integrate the digital wallet into your own app. We can give you one. You can brand it out the box. You can give you. We've got a reference app called Connect Me, but we can white label that. We can put these digital wallet capabilities into your existing app. This is the second thing. We can give you the ability to start issuing credentials right now, and that's the product called Verifiable that Andy mentioned earlier. It was our webinar last week. There's now a wait list for that product when it launches. But if you want a no-code solution to log in to a website, start defining your credentials and issuing them straight away, you can do that. This should really be very seamless and easy to get started. And then lastly, you can integrate all of these things with your CRM system, your employee systems. We have a very simple to use set of APIs that allows you to kind of weave this into your existing customer experiences. So maybe we end there and then jump into the remaining questions.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's the plug anyway. So
yeah,
go to evernym.com/verityflow, get on that wait list as Jamie says, and crack on. So please sign up to that. Q&A. Yeah, so we're well behind on Q&A, I'm afraid, Jamie, but we'll cover as many as we can in 10 minutes and sure, see how we get on, because there's a load that have come in, really varied as well, which is really interesting. So we love to actually see what people are asking about. It shows the sort of interests that people have got and where their heads are at, what they're thinking about. Here's one from Jean Quinn. Isn't the difference between standard credentials and smart credentials a new subject called agents? So Jean, you're revealing some deep knowledge here. That's an agent being robot software that's actively doing the bidding of a verified wallet holder. Well, Jean, that's really interesting, right? So in the design of self-sovereign identity solutions, there are things called agents. And a wallet is essentially an agent that does things where you say, share this data, it does all the encryption and so on. And for enterprises, organizations, they have agents that do the issuing and so on. So there is definitely the potential for me as an individual to have an agent that does my bidding, and maybe it lurks in the cloud somewhere. And the danger, what I said earlier about how easy it's going to be to request and provide data and verify it. It's going to change the economics of it and so on. But a potential downside of that is it becomes so easy, you're just peppered with requests all the time, your phone is just going ping all the time. So a sort of smart agent, an intelligent agent, you could tell it to do your bidding and say, look, if I get a request coming in from UK Border Force that's asking for my passport details in relation to a flight, just provide it to them, right? Don't bother me with it, because I trust the UK Border Force. So you can have, or you can see evolving automated agents that can handle this sort of stuff for you. That's a whole other webinar on that one. So hopefully that helps you on that, Gene. Lots of interesting things around smart agents and what they could do. Let's just go and find, okay. So every webinar we get this really good question. And let's cover it again, because we have got a bunch of new people on as well. If the data lives on your device, is it backed up anywhere? What happens if the user loses the device, and how they recreate the data? Do you want to just tackle that one, Jamie? Maybe compare and contrast with a physical passport. What happens when you lose that?
Well, that's exactly it's one of the best questions we get, and it's, you know, there's questions about revocation and backup. So if I lose my physical passport, well, I have to go to the embassy or go to the office and ask for a new one, and provide all sorts of other, you know, artifacts and documents to prove that it really is me. And I think with a digital wallet, one of the benefits that we'll get is backup. So I'll be able to back up not only the data, but one of my favorite things is be able to back up all the connections I've got. So if my digital wallet is, say, connected to 3 hotel chains, and I lose my phone, I can, assuming that I have some backup capability. So it might be I've done something like I've downloaded my wallet and put it in Dropbox or in a USB file or something, or I've got it backed up to the cloud with iOS, for example. When I get my new device, I just prove myself to my wallet provider. That might be a biometric, or it might be I make a phone call, and then my wallet gets reinstalled, and all my data, not only is all my data there, but my 3 connections to those hotels are still there. So from a customer experience and recovery perspective, it's drastically improved.
Yeah, so it's a really good new service that some entrepreneurial organization might want to offer. And it's not, you know, the backup is actually not the complicated bit, it's the recovery that's the tricky bit.
Exactly.
You need to know it's the right person recovering the wallet, all right? If you don't know that, you risk some imposter recovering your wallet and being able to impersonate you. So backup is easy, recovery needs an awful lot of thought.
It does.
Here's one from Ralph Lippold again. Which are the relevant international bodies who make the interoperable schemas workable and usable across different wallets? And I think on that one, Ralph, these bodies already exist, right? The reason your passport works in different countries is because ICAO have said, this is what a passport looks like. This is the data that goes on the chip as this size, and that, you know, it's readable in this way. So there are already many international bodies out there that standardize credentials, but they're kind of physical credentials. So it's a matter of translating those standards into digital verifiable credentials. And in the case of the IATA Travel Pass, IATA is doing that, and there, you know, Jamie alluded to ecosystems earlier on. IATA is an ecosystem convener. They are saying, these are the sort of the credentials that can be issued. These are the verifications that can be done. This is what the wallet should look like, etc. So those bodies already exist, and they will translate what they do already into the digital credential world. Here's one from James. James is really sparky because he's asked so many, but we're only going to give him one more. With multiple wallets installed, how will holders know which one to use in order to provide the most useful data? That is an interesting one. So you can examine the potential to sync across different wallets, right? That starts to get very interesting. So a credential received in one wallet can be synced to another, much like you sync different devices at the moment. So syncing different wallets starts to get quite interesting as a concept. I don't think anyone has done it yet.
Yeah.
But it's likely to be possible, right? But also with the DID-based connections, if you formed a digital link using these protocols with an airline, then when the airline wants to ping you, it comes down that connection to that wallet that you form that link with them. So you will have that close tie. So the right app would pop up when the notification comes in. So that's a good one though, James. Interesting opportunities to handle things like cross-wallet sync.
Andy, just to say one more thing,
Yeah.
I think this speaks to the much longer roadmap around where agents are going to play a role. So the wallet lives on my device at what we describe as the edge, and agents will likely live in the cloud and act on my behalf. And if we're doing syncing, it's probably going to be the agent in the cloud that helps work out which device to ping and how to synchronize the wallet on my my tablet versus the wallet on my phone. And if it's in the cloud, then maybe don't bother him under these hours, or back up to these locations. So I think it's really about what will become a rich feature set in the agent, but that's probably the next phase on from where we are now. But it's definitely where I think is rich opportunities.
Yeah. Here's one from Tony Sadler. Hi, Tony. What now travel? I'm going to look that one up afterwards. Will this allow multi-device, real-time, two-way continuous communication, but through the wallet? So my iPhone, Android tablet, and Windows laptop just pick up from where I left off in the chat as I move between devices. So that's a bit like the wallet sync question we spoke about earlier. So as the tech is right now, you can do real-time continuous communication different to Facebook Messenger, right? There's no Facebook Messenger in the middle here. It's me to the hotel, me to the airline, me to Jamie, right? There's nothing, there's not a Facebook in the middle that's watching everything you're doing. Once you get multi-wallet or multi-device syncing, the ability to sync across different wallets, there's no reason you couldn't have that sort of chat flow across different devices. I think that could work very nicely.
Andy, I want to pick up the last question that's come in from Matthias Souza. That says, a common and tricky question.
Yeah.
How do we trust the issuer? Because this is all fancy, clever new tech, and isn't it whizzy? But you know, in reality, a hotel is going to trust a passport, an airline is going to trust a COVID test or a vaccine or whatever it might be. So there's a really important answer here, and it's not technical, it's policy. You know, and in every project we've done, probably 25% of the answer is technology. We're talking about features and clever integrations and so on. But really, a lot of this is about where trust comes from at a policy level. So how do I know that the authority that issued the passport is trustworthy? Well, if you think about banking, opening a bank account, maybe let's go in branch. I've got to show two sources of identity, so two sources of address. Well, the bank has to trust the electricity company that they printed out my utility bill correctly. You know, that the electricity company onboarded me properly. So there are regulators and policies in place to say, we trust these issuers, but not those. And that comes from a kind of governance body. And the same thing's going to happen here. We're going to say, okay, I trust these issuers of passport credentials, or I trust these issuers of lab tests. And that's going to be a policy decision, and there'll be governance frameworks. And I strongly recommend everyone looks up a new body that's been set up, well, newish, it's about 18 months old now, called Trust Over IP. And Trust Over IP is looking at the governance of the different layers, governance of ledgers where you're keeping public keys of things, which for the technical folks can dig into. Governance of wallets, how do we know which wallets to trust and what's the economic models there? How do we trust credential exchange and the formats and the signatures and that kind of thing? But then at the top level, how do we trust who the approved issuers are and who's allowed to ask for what? So trustoverip.org is a great kind of global initiative looking at interoperability and policy to make these ecosystems sustainable. And that's how you trust the issuers.
Well, Jamie, thanks. And actually linking onto that is, how do you, where do the issuers put their keys so anyone can pick them up and verify them? And there's a couple of questions on this just to finish off. Yeah. One from Dan Archer and one from Joseph Gersh. Do you use public or permission blockchains within your Verity protocol exchange for verifiable credentials? And Joseph says, is the Evernym wallet implemented using blockchain tech? So maybe I'll just cover those quickly. So for Dan, do you use public or permission blockchains? So our Verity product has been designed to use multiple layer one networks, as we call them. Okay, in current parlance, that would be a distributed ledger or a blockchain. So currently we're supporting the Sovereign, so Hyperledger Indy-based networks, Sovereign in particular, and we just announced support for the Checked network, which is a new network that's being set up at the moment that's got lots of interesting incentives built into it, and that's built on Cosmos. But IATA Travel Pass now uses Sovereign, and Sovereign is a hybrid. It's what's called a public permissioned blockchain. So it's publicly accessible, but the node operators have got to be permissioned to run a node. So it's worth having a look at sovereign.org. And I think that answers Joseph's question, which is, do we use blockchain technology? Well, what happens when you're verifying a credential, Joseph, is that our Verity product, or anything built by another company, what it does is it needs to go and find the issuer's keys, and in this case, the credential points to where the issuer's keys are. The verifier goes in, pulls those keys, and in this case, for IATA, they're pulling them from the Sovereign ledger. So every lab has its own issuer keys registered and its own DID registered on Sovereign. There's some more coming in, but we did say we go to 10 past. We're kind of out of time a wee bit, aren't we? So I think maybe, Jamie, we say thanks very much to you for just showing us the future. And you've been proven right so far ever since I've known you. So that's awesome. This is the way things are going to go. I'd like to say thanks to everyone who's joined and everyone who stayed on late as well for us and asked such awesome questions. Really appreciate it. Thanks for that. Keep an eye out on evernym.com/webinars. We try and bring these up, every 2-3 weeks or so. We've done 2 in 2 weeks this time around. So thanks everyone very much for joining in. Hope you found that useful. Sorry we couldn't get to all your questions. We never do, but they were all awesome anyway. And yeah, look out for the next one. Thanks very much indeed. Cheerio.